Welcome in, everyone, to the deep dive. We're diving into a really interesting case study today.
Yeah, should be fun.
These days, everyone's talking about digital transformation.
Right.
And for companies running, like, massive enterprise systems, it's not as easy as just, flipping a switch.
Definitely not a simple process.
So you sent over these presentation slides detailing one company's journey to SAP S4HANA. Let's just call them Vinci for now.
Good choice.
And we're specifically going to be looking at the financial side of this migration.
Makes sense.
What did they do? Why did they do it? What kind of bumps did they hit along the way? All that good stuff.
Exactly the kind of stuff we love to unpack here.
So right off the bat,
Yeah.
the slides paint this picture of S4HANA as kind of like a must-have thing.
Right. It's the latest and greatest from SAP, their flagship business suite. And for companies like Vinci, moving to S4HANA is about staying ahead of the curve, getting those performance improvements, and setting themselves up for future growth.
Makes sense. And their initial target was back in 2018. Right. Specifically, they were looking at the 1709 release.
Yeah, I think at that point, it was considered a fairly mature and stable version.
Right, so they weren't jumping into the bleeding edge right away.
Exactly.
Okay, so before they even started the main migration to S4HANA,
Right.
it looks like they took a pretty big step within their existing system. They call it their Codex solution, whatever that is.
Interesting.
And in January of 2018, they switched on this thing called the new depreciation engine.
Okay, now this is where things start to get interesting. This engine's really the heart of how they manage the value of their assets over time.
Nice.
And activating it early was crucial. S4HANA has its own way of doing asset accounting, so this move helped them prepare their teams for the new system and really smooth the transition later on.
Smart move.
Definitely forward thinking on their part.
Now, tell me a bit more about this new depreciation engine. What were the main advantages? I know the slides mentioned something about multi-norm management.
Right. So imagine you've got, say, an office building in another country. Different countries might have different accounting rules for how you depreciate that asset.
Oh, interesting.
With the new engine, you can handle these multiple accounting rules for the same asset, which wasn't possible before. It also cuts down on all those manual adjustments he used to have to do. And it actually changes the way the transactions are recorded using a dedicated general ledger account. More technical, but it makes things more streamlined and easier to audit.
So less headache for the finance folks.
Exactly.
And it looks like when they switched over to this new engine, all the old transactions in their system were, replaced, not just updated.
That's right. It wasn't just adding on top of the old way. Everything was transitioned to this new logic.
Interesting. A clean break.
Exactly.
Now, before they could even think about moving their whole financial system to S4HANA, there was this really intense process they had to go through for their existing asset accounting. It's like a lot of closing procedures, checks and balances.
It's like prepping your house for a major renovation. You got to clear out the clutter and make sure the foundation's solid.
So what exactly did they do? The slides mention locking down user access and reconciling ledgers. What does all that mean?
So they basically had to freeze any changes to their asset accounting. No more adding new assets, no more changing existing values. They then had to run all their normal depreciation calculations for the period, make sure there were no errors in any of their postings, and then match up their main ledger balances with the detailed records in their subledgers for assets, like a really thorough audit to make sure everything was in order.
So basically making sure the books were squeaky clean before moving to the new system.
Exactly. And on top of all that, they had to set up depreciation areas for any foreign currencies they were using and run a specific health check report called something like Rasfin-Migger PreCheck, really catching any potential problems early on.
Makes sense. A lot of prep work.
Absolutely. A lot of behind-the-scenes effort to make sure the data's ready for S4HANA.
And it's not just about closing the books, right? There were also some technical configurations to handle. I saw something about setting up a special clearing account and defining a new document type for asset acquisitions.
Right. It's like making sure all the pipes are connected properly before you turn on the water in a new house. You got to get those fundamental settings right to prevent data errors and integration issues down the line.
So it's a lot more than just installing a new piece of software.
It's a whole transformation project.
Speaking of potential problems, the slides also reveal this, kind of scary challenge: data cleansing.
Ah, yes, the dreaded data cleansing.
And the number of errors they found initially is honestly a bit mind-blowing. Almost 44,000 inconsistencies in their financial data. That's a lot of cleanup.
It's a real wake-up call for any company thinking about a system migration. These huge systems accumulate all kinds of data quality issues over time. What's amazing here is that Vinci found all these discrepancies before they even started working with SAP.
So they were being proactive.
Very much so, and it probably saved them a lot of headaches down the line.
So what kind of problems were they finding? I saw mentions of mismatches in open item indicators and missing data in core tables like BSEG.
Yeah, these are the kind of errors that can really throw a wrench into a migration. Open item indicators tell you if a transaction is still open or has been cleared. Imagine having mismatches there. It could completely mess up your financial reporting in the new system. And missing data in BSEG, that's your core financial transaction table. Missing entries there are a recipe for disaster.
It sounds like a nightmare for any accountant.
Absolutely.
But the good news is it looks like calling in the cavalry, SAP's own experts, made a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. Bringing in the specialist helped a lot. They got that error count down dramatically from thousands to just a couple hundred.
So a huge improvement.
It really shows the value of specialized knowledge when you're dealing with these complex systems and data problems.
And the fact that the remaining errors were either considered not critical or were coming from inactive parts of the business.
Right.
Well, that shows that a targeted approach to data cleansing can be incredibly effective.
It's not about fixing every single little thing. It's about focusing on the issues that really matter.
Now, the slides also point to some major hurdles they faced during the actual migration itself. It sounds like pre-configuring the rules in asset accounting was a big one. There were a lot of very specific things they had to get right before they could proceed.
Yeah, they had to follow a very strict set of rules. For instance, each depreciation area in their system had to be linked to a specific accounting principle, and there had to be a clear one-to-one relationship between their ledgers and these principles.
Okay, sounds pretty technical.
It is, and on top of that, S4HANA mandates that all postings to each ledger have to happen in real time, which is a big change from how some older systems worked. Plus, if they had different fiscal year calendars across different ledgers, well, that could cause some major issues. Getting those depreciation area assignments wrong could mean that the financial figures migrated to ACDOCA, the new central data table in S4HANA, would be totally off.
So precision was key.
Absolutely. One wrong setting and things could spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about this AC-Do-Any table. It pops up a lot in the slides. Looks like it's really central to how S4HANA handles financial data.
It's kind of like the heart of the system.
While those familiar tables like BKPF and BSEG are still there, AC-Do-Any seems to be where the real action is. Can you explain what's so special about it?
Sure. Think of AC-Do-Any as this big universal hub for all your financial and controlling data. It pulls together information that used to be scattered across different tables and modules. It basically takes over some of the functions of that older new GL stuff.
I see, so it's simplifying things.
In a way, yes. And while BSEC still holds certain types of transaction details, AC-Do-Any becomes your go-to source for the bulk of your financial line items.
Interesting. Now, it's not just about the database structure, right? The way cost elements are handled also changes, with a tighter link to how financial periods are closed.
Right. It's all about more real-time integration. Secondary cost elements, for instance, now need to be defined at the company code level. And those familiar transaction codes that people used for managing cost elements, things like K01, K02, K03, you know the ones.
Yeah.
Well, they all redirect users to FS00, the main screen for managing general ledger accounts.
Okay, so some muscle memory to retrain there.
Exactly. But the overall goal is to have a tighter, more consistent system.
Makes sense.
And that has a ripple effect on things like financial reporting.
Right, all the reports and analysis need to adapt to this new way of doing things.
Exactly. It's a whole system shift.
Finally, let's touch on the innovations specific to asset accounting in S4HANA. It looks like the whole concept of a main depreciation area is gone.
Gone. Kaput.
Even the processes for calculating depreciation and moving asset data between systems have changed?
It's all about streamlining and integrating. So that old idea of a leading depreciation area, often it was number 01, well, that's out the window. Now, all depreciation areas are essentially equal, which simplifies things. The depreciation calculation itself is handled by this new transaction, Fay Depreciation Post, and that old reconciliation tool, ABST2. Gone. For migrating asset data, they used ABLDT instead of the older OASV, and even carrying forward those asset balances from one year to the next is tied into the main general ledger process now. All these old transactions like AJRW, well, you can just forget about them.
Wow, so a complete overhaul of how they manage their assets.
Absolutely. And the main takeaway is that asset accounting in S4HANA is much more real-time and integrated with the rest of the financial system.
So for everyone listening in, what are the key takeaways from Vinci's experience? Well, for a lot of big companies out there, moving to S4HANA is kind of like a no-brainer.
It's a strategic necessity if you want to stay competitive.
But, as Vinci learned, it's not just about flipping a switch. It's a massive project with a ton of planning, especially when it comes to asset accounting and making sure your data is squeaky clean.
You can't just assume your data is ready to go. You got to get your hands dirty and clean it up.
Exactly, and this whole move involves some pretty big changes to how your financial data is structured, how it's processed, and even the tools you use to manage it.
And while there are a lot of benefits, you got to be prepared to adapt.
Now, this brings us to a really thought-provoking question.
Hit me with it.
Remember how many data errors Vinci found initially?
Oh yeah, thousands of them.
It makes you wonder, what can companies do before they even think about a migration like this to prevent those problems in the first place?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. It's all about proactive data governance. How do you build a culture of data quality from the ground up?
Right, because cleaning up a mess afterward is always more painful than preventing it in the first place.
A stitch in time saves nine, as they say.
Well said. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning into the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.